if you're paying attention to the stuff that we're talking about in YouSchool, then you're probably in a similar perspective as I am as a parent. I want to help my kids find clarity about a lot of things. I want them to understand themselves. I want to help them understand their purpose, their talents, their skills, their strengths, the problems they want to solve. I want to help them discover their values, their belief system. And I really hope we as closely align to that as possible between parents and kids. And I want to help them feel supported along the way. But the problem is it's really difficult, especially when adolescence starts. And naturally, it happens to every kid, but they start pulling away and pursuing, going on a quest on their own to discover those things, their identity, their sense of purpose, and their relationships, so that they can find other people to belong to. And yet I still feel the responsibility and the desire to support them, to help them grow, to help them uncover and discover all that stuff that I care about. So how do you do it? We have less time with them as parents. We have less opportunity to have conversations with them because of the nature of their time and their schedule. We have less access to their attention and engagement because of things like phones, and not just blaming them. It's me as well. I've got 3 kids, a lot to take care of, a lot to manage. In this episode, we're going to get into some specific thoughts about how you as a parent can really help your kid in a significant way grow in clarity, and clarity towards their intrinsic interests. One of the markers and hallmarks of success that I'm looking for as a parent, that I hope for in my kids, is that they would be drawn to things, driven, self-driven. You've heard of self-driven cars, autonomous driving cars. I want my kids to be self-driving cars, self-driving humans, because they're drawn towards something. They're not just getting through life. They're not just trudging along. They're not just accepting things and kind of turning the lights off, but I want them to come alive. And I know you do too. I bet we share this desire that our kids would be motivated, inspired, engaged in life. But the natural state, and we can talk about the natural state forever, for a long time. But the natural state, kind of the gravitational pull that's on our kids, is not towards clarity, but it's to fogginess. Fogginess, the distraction, the desire that arises in every single person during the teenage years to find acceptance, to find people that will accept them, not necessarily for who they are, but how they project themselves. There's fogginess that comes from all the opportunities that they have. There's just almost a curse of options that our kids are facing today. They have stuff going on inside their brains and their bodies that makes things foggy. And the idea of pursuing something because you're intrinsically drawn to it, so much so that it makes you come alive and helps you clarify your decisions, like, am I going to college? Which college, university or not? Which major, which career path? What does it look like for me to not only live my life, but express my values? Those are all major questions that I hope your kids have glimpses of insight, glimpses of clarity. But I want to ensure that my kids don't live in the fogginess, because making decisions in the fog is a setup for failure. It's a setup for making poor choices. It's a setup for wasting time. So how do we do it? I'm going to get real tactical, and I'm going to share a little bit about my experience recently with my 3 kids and what I'm learning about how to be a parent that can guide and coach my kids to clarity, because it's possible. It's very possible. 3 things, 3 tactics. What we're looking for is helping them mine into their lives, mine and look for and be on a quest with them to search for things that are intrinsically true about them. So I'm talking about skills, natural interests, desires, problems that they're drawn to. And so very tactically, one thing that I can do and you can do is to ask them questions about that. Just recently, I was asking one of my kids, and hearing about complaints of school and how boring school is. I said, I know this current kind of roster of teachers you have are not your favorite, but kind of in the big picture, this is what I asked. In the long term, what have you noticed is typically your, let's say, favorite class, or maybe least worst class? And an instant answer, English. And it was interesting to me because I never heard that before. And actually, I probably have, but I forgot because I've been in the fog. Asking questions. And if you sign up for our newsletter, it's called the Start newsletter. Start being more intentional with your kids. And every single one of the START it's an acronym. We send out every single week an actionable idea and tip for you as parents to guide your kids to clarity. And one of those that we send out weekly has to do with asking questions. There's annoying questions that parents ask, and let's say less annoying. I'm not going to try to convince you that there's a magic list of questions that any teenager, regardless of who they are, is going to open up to. But there are certainly better questions, better way to ask questions. And sometimes before you ask a question, it helps for you to tell a story, to set up the question by telling a story. And you don't really need permission to tell your kids stories about your life. In fact, it's probably the most effective thing you could do as a parent, to maintain a connection and build a connection and be a mirror for them to discover things and uncover things about themselves. So number one is asking questions to help your kids mine for in their life intrinsic draws, intrinsic things that they're interested in. Second one, also simple. All three of these are free. Don't take a lot of time. Don't take a lot of energy. It's not that complicated. The second one is to notice and observe. I've noticed that you have fill in the blank. I noticed you keep. I've noticed that you seem to be. It doesn't seem to be like a lot of friction for you to read that book. Is that because you like that book? I'm noticing. I've noticed that when I walk by the TV in the family room, you're looking at. You keep watching videos on YouTube about mountain biking. I've noticed that. I've noticed that when I hear your friends and you talking, you keep talking about this. I've noticed. And that's all you're doing is being a mirror. You're being a mirror to your kid to help them mine for and spot out things that are unique about them. The definition, or part of the weirdness of growing up to understand what makes you unique, is that when you are you don't understand that that's unique. This is getting philosophical. But most kids don't understand their uniqueness because when you're in it, you don't see how this is different than everyone else, because you really just most people absentmindedly assume, well, isn't this how everybody is? Isn't this what everybody's into? A part of the nature of intrinsic interest, intrinsic draw, is that you don't even notice that you're doing it, which is why you, as a parent or an educator, coach, teacher, can actually play a really important role. There's a phase of understanding and coming to awareness of your own intrinsic interests and draws. So number one, ask questions. Number two, notice and observe. And number three, also super simple, but this is really the hack that I want to get into this episode. It's to take notes. Take notes. Let me show you a quick example. My son, I've known this about him for at least a year and a half. He is very interested in politics, history. I guess I'd call it like the social sciences, particularly around big concepts, big ideas. It's election year, so he's been very fascinated, and I've talked to him about that, countless times. We've shared podcasts, but I guess I just didn't notice it. I didn't notice it until a few months ago. We're having a conversation, and it just occurred to me, as the president and co-founder of YouSchool, that I should ask my son some questions and notice and observe things in his life. And I started to literally take notes on my phone. And every week or two, I would just kind of come back to that. I'd just be scrolling, I'd see it, and I'd just look at it. And I got to admit, I'd forgotten, or just hadn't kept in my consciousness, some of the things that I noticed or that he had shared. And it wasn't until I started to connect some dots and see the same things pop up on these notes. He's listened to this podcast. He likes that. He's talked about this before. He gets really lit up when he talks about that. And I'm starting to capture a profile of who this character is. And I'm starting to make these connections that I then have a better data set to feed back to him, to mirror back to him. So ask questions, notice and observe, and take notes, rinse and repeat. The natural state for our kids is not clarity, it's fogginess. It's being overwhelmed by options. It's trying to fit in and find people who accept you. It's trying to find people who won't reject the weird parts of you. Our kids need us to mirror what we see in them, to validate that it's okay and good and right and a part of who they are. They need us to affirm them with our words. They need us to expose them to opportunities. So now I'm sending my son more podcasts. Have you thought about this one? Have you heard about that one? Have you thought about this as a major or a career? Would you ever be interested in talking about this? I found this digital course and academy you might be interested in taking. Along the way, that is supportive behavior, supportive of your intrinsic interests and designs. I'm encouraging, I'm cheerleading. Now, with that kid who likes English, I'm going to start paying attention to that because I've taken notes and start offering or recommending, or why don't we go to, try things. Why don't we go to a book reading, poetry reading? I don't know, let's try stuff. I've got a young kid who she has tremendous, exceptional self-awareness, empathy and understanding of others, social awareness. And she just naturally has always done this, thoughtful gifts. And she's so excited to build a connection with people by giving them thoughtful gifts. She gets really deep into things like making slime, which actually involves chemistry and quite a bit of experimentation. These are just unique things that I'm noticing about her that I'm taking notes on. I'm asking questions about these things, and I'm noticing back to her and saying and mirroring and validating things in her. Because I want those glimpses of clarity that all of our kids get along the way to become clearer and clearer, and ultimately become fixed points that they can chart against. And when it comes to what college, which major, what career, where to live, who to be friends with, those fixed points can be tremendously useful. So all of a sudden, I know I'm more on the side of my kids' lives as they become teenagers. I know maybe even the back seat, maybe I'm actually on the sidewalk watching them drive by, but it doesn't mean I don't have a critical role to play and you have a critical role to play. It might not be as direct as signing them up for things, driving them places, organizing play dates, but it's just as powerful and actually probably more potent for their long-term life, well-being, success, and happiness. So make a move, be intentional to help your kids go from fogginess to clarity. It's the gift that keeps on giving.